All right, let's jump into another deep dive. One on Interlock Consulting and the other on Soul.com.
Sounds intriguing. What caught your eye about these two?
Well, what's really interesting is that they both have this shared mission of positive change,
Mm-hmm.
but their approaches seem pretty distinct.
Yeah, I see that. One's more focused on capacity building and the other on community.
Exactly. So our deep dive today is all about exploring those nuances.
I'm game. Let's see what we can learn from both.
Okay, so right off the bat, Interlock's mission statement really grabbed my attention. It's all about harnessing, quote, the power of the human spirit
Ooh, I like
to
that.
drive organizational change and sustainability.
Definitely different from the usual profits above all mentality we see so often.
Refreshing. And it suggests they see people as more than just cogs in a machine.
More like the fuel that drives positive change.
Exactly. And you see that reflected in their service areas, too.
Oh yeah, how so?
Well, they offer education and training, DEI consulting and sustainability, or ESG consulting.
Makes sense.
But what I find particularly interesting is their focus on the social side of ESG.
Ah, that's a big one these days.
It is. So many companies seem to think a quick donation checks that box.
It's definitely become a bit of a buzzword, but Interlock seems to go deeper.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm curious, what sets their approach apart? What are they doing differently?
Well, it's about weaving social responsibility into the very fabric of the organization. Not just an add-on, but a core part of how they operate.
Ah, so it's about systemic change, not just surface level stuff.
Exactly. Like instead of just offsetting carbon emissions with a tree planting project, they might help a company revamp its entire supply chain to ensure fair labor practices.
Wow, that's a whole other level of commitment.
It is. It's about addressing root causes, not just symptoms.
Okay, so now that we have a sense of their mission, let's talk about the people behind Interlock.
Yeah, they've got a pretty impressive team.
They do. Starting with Charles Howard, their senior consultant and executive director.
What's his story?
He's got this really interesting blend of engineering and education in his background.
You don't see that every day?
Not at all. And he's worked with some major companies like Ford and P&G.
So he brings both practical experience and a deep understanding of human dynamics to the table.
A perfect combination for Interlock's approach.
Makes sense.
And then we have Raquel Motati, senior consultant and commercial director.
Tell me about her.
Well, she's got extensive experience in the corporate world.
So she knows the ins and outs of how businesses operate.
Right, but here's the twist. She's also trained in sociology and psychodrama.
Wow, that's fascinating. You can really see Interlock's focus on the human element shining through.
Absolutely. They understand that lasting change involves understanding people, not just systems.
It's about the human heart of business, so to speak.
Exactly. And it's not just Charles and Raquel. They've got this whole globally diverse team of associated consultants.
Oh, wow. So they're bringing in perspectives from all over the world.
Exactly. Each consultant brings their own unique expertise to the table.
That's got to be a huge asset when tackling complex challenges.
Oh, absolutely. It allows them to approach problems from multiple angles and offer really tailored solutions.
Solutions that take into account cultural nuances and specific contexts.
Right, because what works in one part of the world might not work in another.
It's about understanding the bigger picture and recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to these challenges.
Okay, so we've got a good grasp on Interlock now. Ready to switch gears to Soul.com.
Let's do it. They already caught my attention with that question. What would your company look like if it were a community?
Right, such a powerful prompt. It really gets you thinking differently about work.
It makes you envision a workplace that feels more collaborative, purposeful.
Exactly. And they really believe that this community-driven approach can address some of the biggest problems we see in workplaces today, like inefficiency.
Lack of ownership, disengagement, all those things that drain the life out of work.
Exactly. Soul.com is all about unlocking human agency, as they put it.
Okay, I like that. But what does that actually look like in practice? How do they make it happen?
Well, they've got 5 key focus areas for building capacity. First up is leadership development.
That's crucial in any organization.
It is, but they have a pretty unique take on it.
Oh, how so?
They believe it's not just about acquiring skills, but about cultivating the right mindset, the right intentions.
Interesting. So it's less about checking boxes and more about developing a certain way of being.
Exactly. And they even quote Einstein on this.
I'm intrigued. What's the quote?
I never teach my pupils. I only attempt to provide the conditions in which they can learn.
Ah, I love that. It's about creating the right environment for growth rather than force-feeding information.
Exactly.
But I'm curious, how does that actually translate into their leadership development program? What do they actually do?
Well, think experiential learning, mentorship, a big focus on self-awareness.
Sounds very holistic.
It is. It's about helping leaders tap into their own inner wisdom and lead with authenticity and purpose.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about this unity and diversity thing they emphasize?
Yeah.
We hear so much about DEI these days, but Soul.com seems to be taking it a step further. How so?
Well, they don't just see diversity as a checkbox to tick off.
Right.
They see it as a source of strength and innovation.
I like that, moving beyond just representation to actually leveraging those differences.
Exactly. Instead of trying to fit everyone into a pre-existing mold, they help companies create a culture where diverse voices are genuinely heard and valued.
Where those differences are seen as assets, not liabilities.
Exactly. And that ties into their emphasis on collective decision-making and a culture of ownership, which falls under their culture and governance focus area.
Ah, so it's about moving away from those top-down hierarchies.
And empowering everyone to have a voice and contribute their unique perspectives.
Oh, but can that really work in a traditional corporate environment?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And I think that's where their focus on purpose and values comes in.
Okay, I'm listening.
They believe that when people feel connected to a shared purpose, a purpose that resonates with their own values,
Yeah.
they're more likely to be engaged, motivated, committed to collective success.
It's about finding that sweet spot where individual aspirations align with the overall mission of the organization.
Exactly. But how do they actually go about uncovering that shared purpose?
Good question. It sounds like it would take a lot of work.
Well, it involves a lot of listening, dialogue, co-creation.
Ah, so it's a very collaborative process.
It is. They might facilitate workshops, conduct surveys, even use storytelling to help employees connect with the company's core values and articulate their own personal motivations.
So it's not about dictating a set of values from the top down.
Right. It's about building a sense of shared ownership and responsibility.
Interesting approach. Okay, so we've explored Interlock's focus on capacity building and Soul.com's emphasis on community. Before we dive into their specific programs, I think it's time to take a step back.
I agree. Let's reflect on what we've learned about these two organizations so far.
Okay, so it seems like both Interlock and Soul.com share this fundamental belief in the power of human potential to drive positive change.
Yes, but they come at it from different angles.
Right. Interlock is more about strengthening existing structures and systems.
While Soul.com is more focused on transforming the very culture and mindset of organizations.
And both seem to recognize that lasting change requires more than just superficial tweaks
It's about addressing those root causes of dysfunction.
and creating a more human-centered approach to work.
I'm really curious to see how these approaches play out in their specific programs. Ready to dig a little deeper.
Absolutely. Let's explore how they put these principles into action.
Perfect. But first, let's give our listener a moment to absorb all this information. We'll be back in part 2 to delve into the specifics of their programs and uncover some surprising connections between these two seemingly distinct organizations. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Interlock and Soul.com. We've been exploring their different approaches to positive change, Interlock focusing on capacity building within existing structures, and Soul.com taking a more community-driven approach.
It's like comparing apples and oranges. Both are fruits, but they're distinct in their own way.
Exactly. But now I'm really curious to see how these philosophies actually play out in their programs.
Yes, well, let's get into the nitty-gritty.
So one program really caught my eye that's offered by both Interlock and Soul.com, Soul-Driven Leadership.
Interesting that they both have a program with the same name.
Right. What's fascinating is they both offer this, but given their different overall philosophies, I'm wondering how their approaches differ.
That's a great question. Let's see if we can unpack that. Starting with Interlock, with their focus on structure and existing frameworks.
I'd imagine their version of soul-driven leadership might be more about providing practical tools and strategies.
Almost like a toolkit for leaders to integrate these principles into their current systems.
Exactly. It's about working within the system to create change, but change that's driven by deeper values.
A more human-centered approach.
Right. So instead of just telling leaders to be more soulful, they might provide concrete training on things like
Give me an example.
fostering psychological safety within their teams, encouraging open communication and vulnerability.
Oh, I like that. That can be so powerful for building trust and collaboration.
Absolutely. And it ultimately leads to more innovation and better results.
So it's like equipping leaders with the tools to create a more soulful work environment, but within the context of their existing structures.
Exactly. They're meeting leaders where they are and giving them practical ways to make a difference.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, flipping over to Soul.com with their emphasis on community and bottom-up change, I'm really curious to see how they tackle soul-driven leadership. What's their flavor?
Well, if Interlock is about providing a toolkit, I imagine Soul.com's approach is more about igniting that inner spark.
More about fostering self-awareness and inspiring leaders to connect with their authentic selves.
Exactly. It's less about external tools and more about internal transformation.
So leading by example, inspiring others through genuine connection and shared purpose.
Precisely. It's almost like two sides of the same coin, you know?
I do. One working from the outside in and the other from the inside out.
And I think that's what makes this comparison so fascinating. We're seeing two complementary approaches to a shared goal.
And highlighting the multifaceted nature of leadership.
Absolutely. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing.
And wouldn't you say that having both perspectives is essential for creating truly holistic and sustainable change within an organization?
I completely agree. Imagine combining Interlock's practical strategies with Soul.com's emphasis on inner transformation.
That's a powerful combination. You'd have leaders who not only possess the tools to create a soulful workplace, but also embody those values themselves.
They'd be walking the talk, inspiring others through their actions and authenticity.
Okay, so we've explored their distinct approaches to soul-driven leadership. Now let's zoom back out to their overall offerings.
Right, big picture time.
Exactly. We've talked about Interlock's impressive, globally diverse team, but what else makes them unique? What are some of their other standout services or areas of expertise?
Well, what really impressed me was their focus on the social aspect of ESG. They're not just paying lip service to it. They're really trying to embed social responsibility into a company's DNA.
So they might help a company develop ethical sourcing practices,
Improve employee well-being programs.
or foster a truly inclusive workplace culture.
Right. It's about going beyond those superficial initiatives and making real, lasting change.
And they have consultants all over the world. Which brings me to another question. How does their global perspective inform their work? Do they offer insights that are unique to their international experience?
Absolutely. Having a diverse team like that brings in so much cross-cultural understanding.
It must be invaluable.
It is. They can navigate those nuances and sensitivities that a more homogenous group might miss.
And they can help companies tailor their strategies to different cultural contexts.
Making sure their efforts are both effective and respectful.
So they're really bridging cultures, creating a more interconnected and inclusive approach to organizational transformation.
I love that. It's a global perspective that's so needed in today's world.
All right, now shifting gears back to Soul.com, we talked about their unique approach to unity and diversity, but is there anything else about their methodology that stands out to you?
Well, I was really intrigued by their emphasis on learning and cooperation.
Ah, that's a big one for them.
It is. They have this really cool concept of seeing organizations as living, evolving entities.
Constantly adapting and learning from their experiences.
Exactly. It's a much more dynamic view of organizations than we typically see.
So instead of prioritizing efficiency and control, they're encouraging adaptability and learning.
Precisely. And they help companies embrace this more fluid approach through things like
Like what?
workshops that encourage collaborative problem solving, knowledge sharing, and continuous improvement.
Ah, so it's about creating a culture where mistakes are seen as learning opportunities.
And feedback is welcomed as a catalyst for growth.
So it's not about being perfect, it's about constantly evolving and getting better.
It's a growth mindset applied to the entire organization.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, before we move on, I want to touch on a specific program mentioned in our notebook LM files.
Which one?
Soul.com's Addressing Racial Inequity course.
Ah, that's such a crucial topic, especially in today's world.
It is. And what really struck me about this particular program was their emphasis on action-based learning.
So it's not just about talking about the issues, it's about actually doing something.
Exactly. Participants don't just passively absorb information, they apply the concepts to real-world scenarios.
And develop concrete skills and strategies for addressing racial inequity within their own spheres of influence.
So, for example,
They might have participants analyze their organization's hiring practices through an equity lens.
To identify potential biases.
and develop strategies to create a more inclusive and equitable process.
So it's about moving beyond theoretical discussions and actually implementing changes within existing systems.
Making a tangible difference.
Exactly. Okay, before we head into the final part of our deep dive, I think it's important to pause and reflect on what we've uncovered so far.
Good idea. Take a breath.
So we've explored two very distinct but complementary approaches to organizational transformation.
Each offering valuable insights and unique methodologies.
And I think the real takeaway here is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
You got it. It's about finding what resonates with you, what aligns with your values, and the specific needs of your organization.
And maybe even combining those approaches, taking the best of both worlds.
It's creating something truly unique and transformative.
Now, are you ready to delve into the final part of our deep dive and explore what all of this means for our listener?
Absolutely. Let's bring it home and see what actionable takeaways we can uncover.
Perfect. But first, let's give our listener a moment to process all this amazing information. We'll be back in part 3 to wrap things up and leave them with some food for thought. Stay tuned. All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into interlockandsoul.com.
It's been a fascinating journey so far.
It has. We've explored their contrasting yet complementary approaches to organizational transformation.
Yeah, one building capacity within systems, the other fostering a more community-driven approach.
And we've seen how they're both working towards this more human-centered, purpose-driven way of working.
Right, but I think at this point, our listeners probably wondering how all of this translates into actionable change.
Exactly. What can we as individuals actually do with these insights? How can we make a difference in our own workplaces or even beyond?
Right, because it's easy to get inspired by these ideas, but true transformation requires action.
Absolutely. So let's unpack that. Where do we even begin?
Well, I think Interlock's focus on the social aspect of ESG is a great place to start.
It's a powerful reminder that we all have a responsibility to create a more just and equitable world, even in our work.
Yeah, and it's not just about those big corporate policies or initiatives.
It's about the everyday choices we make, how we treat each other, how we use our influence.
Exactly. It's about those small, everyday actions that add up over time.
So asking ourselves some tough questions, like, am I contributing to a culture of respect and inclusion?
Am I speaking up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable?
These things might seem small, but they can really make a difference.
They can create a ripple effect, leading to a more ethical and sustainable work environment.
And that connects so well with Soul.com's emphasis on unity in diversity, right?
Absolutely. It's not just about having diversity. It's about truly valuing and leveraging those differences.
So imagine a workplace where everyone feels safe to be themselves, where different perspectives are celebrated.
Where creativity flourishes because of those differences, not in spite of them.
That's the dream. But how do we actually get there? It seems like such a monumental task.
It starts with each of us, you know. Are we truly listening to understand, or just waiting for our turn to speak?
Are we willing to challenge our own biases and assumptions?
Are we creating space for others to share their stories and perspectives?
It's about those everyday acts of leadership, no matter what our job title is.
Exactly. We can all choose to act with integrity, compassion, a commitment to creating a more just and equitable world.
And I love how Soul.com talks about the company as a learning organism.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
It's a reminder that transformation isn't about reaching some perfect end state.
It's an ongoing process, a journey of learning and growth.
So it's okay to not have all the answers, to make mistakes along the way.
Yeah, it's about embracing that messiness, the challenges, the constant evolution.
And being willing to experiment, to take risks, to learn from our failures.
Creating a culture of curiosity and innovation.
Okay, so that we've talked about individual actions, but what about those of us who work within larger organizations? How can we apply these insights to create systemic change?
Well, think back to Interlock's structured approach. They offer all these practical tools and frameworks for integrating these principles into existing systems.
So maybe we could advocate for incorporating those tools into our company's leadership development programs.
Right. Or even just start by leading by example, showing the power of a more inclusive and collaborative leadership style within our own teams.
And don't underestimate the power of sharing your own story.
Oh yeah, storytelling is huge.
Sharing our own experiences, our own journeys of growth and transformation can really inspire others.
It's like planting seeds, nurturing them, and trusting they'll eventually blossom into something amazing.
I love that analogy. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from this conversation? What's that key message you want to leave them with?
Well, if I had to pick one thing, it would be this. The power to create positive change really does lie within each of us. Whether it's through those small, everyday actions or by challenging systems and structures, we all have a role to play in building a more just, equitable, and soulful world.
That's a beautiful and empowering message, and it perfectly encapsulates everything we've explored today.
And don't underestimate your own power to make a difference. Never underestimate that.
Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into interlockandsoul.com.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you found it insightful and inspiring, and that you feel empowered to create positive change in your own life and work.
We've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep believing in the power of human potential to transform our world.